Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of ranking every Leafs game from the 2024-25 season. Now, yes, I know the Toronto Maple Leafs regular season has been released on the 16th of June, but for 25-26, but I'm still going to do my rankings for 2024-25. And the second part we're going to talk about is December and January for those Leafs games. If you haven't checked out the first part of ranking every Leafs game, which is from October 2024 through November 2024, starting with the Montreal game with the 1-0 loss to Montreal to the end where the Leafs won 5-3 over the Lightning, I'll have the link in the description below this video if you want to check that out. So without that being said, let's continue on with the second part of ranking every NHL game from the best to the worst. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we?
So continuing off with our tier list, starting off with the 4-1 win over the Chicago Blackhawks, because this was the return of Tyler Bertuzzi and T.J. Brodie, who used to play for the Leafs, and their return gets spoiled, and it was an impressive win for the Leafs. You know, you had the Leafs score twice. One in the first period, the other on the second period by Austin Matthews and John Tavares before Chicago's Reichel scored before Fraser Minton responded back with a goal of his own. So it was a next-gen game. It was an easy win, literally. So that gives it an A tier. Next off is the Nashville game, the 3-2 win over the Nashville Predators. And I know the Leafs started Joseph Woll in net against the Predators. I don't understand. Because the Leafs barely won over the Preds. They didn't, shut them out like in 2023 where the Leafs beat the Nashville Predators 4-0. Especially when the Leafs were down 1-0 with a fluke bounce on Jonathan Marchessault through 40 minutes. Before in the third period, the Leafs scored 3 unanswered goals in the third period by Austin Matthews scoring twice, William Nylander scoring on the power play, before the Preds made it a 1-goal game in the third period. Honestly, I was okay with this win. But barely beating the Predators is just... It's just so much of a... Well, it's nearly unacceptable, but holy crap, you're supposed to take care of the Nashville Predators because they got Steven Stamkos, Brady Sage, Jonathan Marchessault, Ryan O'Reilly, and look what happens. Purgatory for the Nashville Predators. An absolute bombshell. So, of course, the Leafs won, don't get me wrong, but you saw what happened when they were up 3-1. They scored 3 unanswered goals. When it was 1-0 in the first 40 minutes of play. And then, of course, Leafs end up giving a return goal to Nashville, and Leafs end up winning the game there. You're supposed to beat them easily, not give them anything. Imagine this game went 1-0 in a shutout, or worse, in overtime. If this game was like that, whether it's 1-0 Nashville or 4-3 overtime win by the Preds, who knows? This could be on the D tier list, but it doesn't. Next one is the 3-1 loss to the Washington Capitals. Oh boy, how can I say this? Probably the most sloppiest game I've ever seen, where the Leafs tied it at 1 in the second period, and everything was going well. Everything was going well until everything went crashing down in the third period, where the puck deflected off of a ref, and Connor McMichael scored, which pretty much gave the Leafs a sour taste in their mouths in the long run. Not only that, but the only reason the Caps won was because Oliver Ekman-Larsson got penalized twice. One for high sticking, the other for the other one for a slash, and Austin Matthews getting cross-checked with no penalty called on Washington. So, holy crap, that was just unfair advantage on the refs. So that's a D tier. Embarrassing performance from Toronto. Next off is the Pittsburgh game. Now, just like the Washington game, the Leafs got absolutely manhandled, but also got screwed by the refs. There was a hooking call on Matthew Knies in the first period, which led to a Richard Raquel goal. Then Mitch Marner had to put the fire out by tying the game up at 1 before giving it up to Brandon Rust for a 2-1 Penguins lead, before William Nylander tied the game up at 2 in the second period with a power play goal. And then Austin Matthews getting called for a high stick, which wasn't a high stick, allowing Michael Bunting to score the go-ahead goal. And the Penguins scored two unanswered short-handed empty net goals in the dying minutes of the game, where the Leafs didn't even get a chance to tie the game up at 3. It's completely unacceptable. And you know how much I hate the short-handed goals. Like, just go back to 2023, where the Leafs let 2 short-handed goals by the Canucks. You just can't escape that. So this one, of course, really rubbish. An absolute disgrace of a game. So that's a D tier. Next one is the 2-1 overtime win over the New Jersey Devils, where, of course, the Leafs get a chance to face off with Sheldon Keefe once again. But this time, Anthony Stolarz was in net. And there's so many good things about this game, but a lot of bad. First off, you got to go back to, oh Lord, the silly penalties the Leafs took. The amount of silly penalties they took was just egregious. The Leafs got outscored 16-1 in the first period. Andrei Palat with a goal, and Jacob Markstrom going nuts in the first 2 periods before Pontus Holmberg tied the game up at 1 and with a shorthanded goal before Austin Matthews won the game in overtime. And it was just a up and down roller coaster game, a roller coaster of emotions. It's one of those games where they were down 1-0, but they came back strong. It's like the Anaheim game and the Tampa Bay game, where the Leafs were down 1-0 to them before tying it up in the third period, and they end up winning the game in overtime. So this one was a heroics game, putting this in the A tier. A really great game for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially after going on a 2-game losing streak, and of course the Leafs going 2-0 when the Leafs play against Sheldon Keefe. Next off is the Anaheim Ducks game, where, oh my god, everything was going well. Like, the Leafs were up 3-1 over the Ducks, only to allow Jackson Lacombe to cut the lead to 1. And everything was just, oh my god, there was a lot of bad things. Like, you start off with Anthony Stolarz leaving the game with a leg injury, which led to Joseph Woll starting in the net for the next 40 minutes. And that wasn't really good, because, Anthony Stolarz was a good goalie, and now he gets injured? Like, really? Are you kidding me? So that leads to the Leafs finding a way to get the job done, specifically against Lucas Dostal and the Anaheim Ducks. We didn't destroy them, but holy crap. It was just, Leafs did win the first, it did go up 3-1. They were leading 3-1, but you saw what happened in the second period. Things went downhill from there. But the only good thing about this game was Max Pacioretty having a 3-point night where he had an assist and 2 goals. But everything else sucked, so that's a C tier at its best. Again, if Anthony Stolarz was in it, if the Leafs destroyed the Anaheim Ducks, this would have been like higher on the list, like an A tier, but it doesn't. Next off was the Detroit Red Wings game, where the Leafs lost 4-2 to the Red Wings. Oh boy. Another game where the refs had to play hero and screw the Leafs over every freaking time. Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. What can go wrong will go wrong. The first one was a kneeing penalty on Toronto, 42 seconds into the first period, which resulted in a Red Wings power play. Then came Michael Rasmussen, the Rasmussen goal, and then Matthews tying the game up at 1 in the second period. I'm like, okay, everything's going pretty well. Only to let Moritz Seider scored the goal last minute in the second period. And then, of course, third period, Knies tied the game up. And then Jeff Petrie scored the another goal, the response goal. And the infamous part was the offside goal on Mitch Marner when it clearly wasn't offside. Like, from my point of view, that was a good goal by Mitch Marner. It was once again a referee show from the penalties to that stupid no goal on, I believe it was Mitch Marner. So, absolute shambolic. Sloppy period, one thing. Another goal called back for offside is another. So that's a D tier. Oh boy, where do I go from this? Like, where do I go from there?
And I know I'm going to go a bit off on this because I think this was in December 2024 where I completely lost my mind, especially against Detroit, where the goal was called for offside. After the game, I literally was so frustrated. It's not even funny. What I did, okay, I just said that game was rigged on Twitter, okay? The Red Wings won was because Marner got robbed of a goal. That was a horrible win. Leafs deserve better. Absolute bull. And I think the user under the name of Red Wings 2002 _ showed me this. I don't know if you could see that I know it. That's the goal that they showed. That's like the what the hell? That's the replay that this user said, saying that was a no goal because Austin Matthews was offside. But when you look at the damn play, when you look at it, it was not, because the puck wasn't like, what's the word? It wasn't ahead of the blue line. It wasn't like on the blue line. Okay, there's no inclusive evidence that was offside on Mitch Marner. Yet the Red Wings challenged the play for offside. And this didn't, and of course, that went all night long. I've uploaded the rant, and I think it went on for a very long time. I took it to the Detroit Red Wings. I went into the Detroit Red Wings Twitter page and Instagram page, stating my frustration that the only reason they won was because Mitch Marner's goal got called back for offside, which wasn't a winner at all. I'm sorry, you do the math. I'm sorry. And then, of course, it went on until when the Leafs played against the Buffalo Sabres, before the Leafs in the Sabres game. I'm not even surprised. I'm not 100% surprised. I'm just so upset because of that stupid goal. And I still went into consideration. Still went into a whole argument with this guy. It's not even funny. Saying the goal was a no goal because watch the replay of the game and you will understand. I don't understand. I really don't. And I literally got thrown under the bus by Red Wings fans. I'm not even kidding. I really did. Because of one stupid call that Mitch Marner got called for offside and there was no goal. Like, what the hell was that? Okay, I think I've went on to this for quite some time. Let's just move on. Let's just move on to the Buffalo game. Really.
So, picking up where we last left off, I believe it was the 5-3 win over the Buffalo Sabres, where the Leafs overcame a 3-1 deficit against the Buffalo Sabres. And surely enough, that was like a huge victory, like a huge win for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because the Sabres were on a 9-game losing streak. So what do you have to do? You had to beat Buffalo. And just like that, you saw Nick Robertson score. You saw John Tavares getting a hat trick. And, of course, you saw Dylan Cousins get called for unsportsmanlike in the diamonds of the game, where the Leafs end up winning 5-3. So this one gives it an S tier. Only downside was Dennis Hildeby not getting that goalie goal, which is unfortunate. But, that's hockey. Sometimes you're going to get a goalie goal, sometimes you're not. Next off is the Dallas game, which was the 5-3 win over the Dallas Stars. And the Leafs did what they had to do, because the Leafs had an iffy first period where it was tied at 1 before kicking into gear with a great second period with a 3-goal wreckage from William Nylander. Nick Robertson, and Bobby McMahon. So everything was clicking in the second period. The only thing that was a big downfall was the Leafs taking silly penalties where you had Connor Timmins slashing and Connor Timmins getting called for slashing and a delay of game call. Simone Benoit holding and tackling the Stars player, and John Tavares for elbowing. So that was inexcusable. But the only good thing about that game was at least Chris Tanev returned to Dallas as a Leafs player, who was a rental player for the Stars from the 2023-24 season, as well as the Stars' 2024 Stanley Cup playoff run to the Western Conference Finals. So this one gives it an A tier. Next off is the December 20th game where the Leafs won 6-3 over the Buffalo Sabres. And this game was, Matt Murray's return. Matt Murray's return to the Leafs for the first time since March 2023, where the Leafs won 6-2 over the Florida Panthers. And, everything was going well. You saw the Leafs they ended up destroying the Sabres 5-1 before giving up 2 goals from the Sabres via Matthias Samuelsson and Owen Power before William Nylander put the fire out with an empty netter, which gave Matt Murray his first win for the first time since, again, like I said, March 2023 in a 6-2 win over the Panthers, making 24 saves and giving the Sabres their 12th straight loss in a season. Yeah, sure, there was a lot of mishandling calls where, okay, you get Buffalo getting no goals twice because Jason Zucker high-sticked Chris Tanev and Matt Murray's stick interfered with Sam Lafferty for a coach's challenge. So the Leafs end up getting the dub there, and they didn't let Buffalo win that one, so that is an S tier. Next off is the Leafs 6-3 loss to the New York Islanders, where, oh boy, the Leafs actually dropped the ball in that game because they gave up 3 goals in the first period and 3 goals in the third period. You had Bo Horvat having a 3-point night, Isaiah George scoring his first goal in the NHL, and nothing went right there. The only saving grace was William Nylander having a 2-goal night versus the Islanders, and they nearly came back from a 3-1 deficit. But also the rest sucked. I understand it was a back-to-back, but it's just flat out inexcusable, especially when it was the Islanders who actually sucked. So this one gives it a D tier. Absolutely disgusting. Next off was the December 23rd game where the Leafs lost 5-2 to the Winnipeg Jets because, oh boy. The Jets got revenge on the Leafs from October 2024. Will let in 4 goals, huge red flag, and an empty netter. And the Leafs lineup was a mess, especially on the defense. Morgan Rielly paired up with Connor Timmins. Simon Benoit paired up with Jake McCabe. And Mark Scheifele getting a hat trick, and Kyle Connor getting 2 goals. So, this game gives it a D tier. I understand it was an afternoon game, but still, it's just not the way to achieve it. I understand. The Winnipeg Jets, they were a really good team, offensively and defensively. They had a good power play and a good penalty kill, and Connor Hellebuyck was playing lights out. So there's no shame in losing to the best Jets team yet. But other than that, it's just not acceptable. Next off is the December 27th, 2024 game where the Leafs end up beating the Detroit Red Wings 5-2, where the Leafs destroyed Detroit in the first 2 periods 5-0 before giving up 2 goals to Detroit in the third period, which didn't mean anything to Detroit. And the Leafs spoiled Todd McLennan's coaching debut with the Red Wings. And also, this was a Mitch Marner game. The Mitch Marner hat-trick game in Detroit, where he got his hat-trick, which made up for the 1 goal versus Detroit, where it was called back for offside, back on December 14th. And Nick Robertson scored the buzzer-beating goal, where he got it off in time, so really good game. And that is an A tier. Yes, I know there was the one Canada game, the World Juniors Championship game, where Canada lost to La Vita, so that sucked. But at least they still got the Leafs winning, so at least there's that. Next off is the 5-2 loss to the Washington Capitals. And oh baby, this game couldn't have come at a worse cause. Another back-to-back. Matt Murray starts in net. And Alexander Ovechkin scored. Alexander Ovechkin returns from injury. And the Leafs end up shooting themselves in the foot. Matt Murray gets cooked by the Capitals. Leafs couldn't get anything done. They let in 2 goals. They scored 2 goals, but the rest sucked. You saw Alex Ovechkin scoring the empty netter to keep pace and break Wayne Gretzky's scoring record. And the biggest insult, the Leafs ran into a hot goaltender in Logan Thompson. So that was a freaking purgatory game. So that was a D tier. Next off is the New York Islanders game, which was the New Year's Eve game, where the Leafs end up winning 3-1 over the New York Islanders. And, well, there was a lot of things that went overboard here. Okay, sure, you got David Kampf scoring in period 1. Jean-Gabriel Pageau scored to tie things up before Steven Lorentz responded back with a go-ahead goal. And John Tavares' 6-on-4 power play goal at the empty netter, which gave Patrick Waugh a taste of his own medicine, and the face on the bench. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now, normally this game would have been an A tier, but it's just not because, oh boy, where do I begin? The penalty calls on, not penalty calls, the no goals. You saw the Islanders tie the game up at 1, and they called it back for offside. And then, of course, Matthew Knies, he gets his goal. He scores to make it 2-0 Leafs. Yeet, call it back for goalie interference. 2 coaches challenged, 2 goals counted back in 1 game. Now, imagine if Matthew Knies' goal counted without interfering Ilya Sorokin. It would have been a different ball game. It would have been 4-1, period. But you know what? It is what it is, so I'm giving this a B tier. Next off is the Leafs' 2-1 win over the New York Islanders, where, yes, it was another home-and-home game, where the Leafs find a way to get the job done. Where the Leafs had, they played to the wire, down to the wire, where Bobby McMahon had a 2-goal night. He scored the dagger. And the Leafs dodged a bullet where the refs called a no-goal on Anders Lee because the blown was blown dead. And thank God the Leafs didn't choke this game away, or else it would have been a bad ending. It would have been really bad. So, again, that's an 8 tier. Next off is the 6-4 win over the Boston Bruins, where, surprise, surprise, Matthew Knies gets a hat trick. And this game was like a roller coaster because the Leafs were up 2-0. They let the Bruins tie the game back up at 2, and then it was 3-2 by Matthew Knies, something like that. And then, of course, David Pastrnak tied the game up at 3, and of course making it back to a 1-goal game. That's how dramatic it was. With the exception of Mitch Marner's empty netter, which did count, and another empty netter by Austin Matthews to put the icing on the cake. And especially the top line. This was, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and Matthew Knies all had 13 points. Well, the top line had 13 points. Knies has 3 goals and 2 assists. Mitch Marner's 1 goal and 4 assists. And Matthews 1 goal and 2 assists. So that gives it an S tier. A really fantastic game. Next off is the 3-2 overtime win over the Philadelphia Flyers, aka the Philadelphia Propellers. Now, it wasn't a great game, mostly because in the second period where the Leafs were up by 2-1, with Matthew Knies and Oliver Ekman-Larsson scoring in the first period before Scott Laughton scored the tying goal, before it went in overtime, where the Leafs end up winning the game in overtime by Morgan Riley. 2 goals by the Leafs D, and down to 5 D-men. Now, the only thing that was a big, hitting the nail was, I believe it was the Jake McCabe roughing call, and then of course getting injured after Garrett Hathaway gave him a concussion, and an elbow call on Max Domi, which gave him a fine for elbowing. So that's a B tier. A B tier, no matter what happens. So there's that. Next off is another home and home game where the Leafs played against the Flyers, 3-2 win, and this was a come from behind game where Travis Konecny scored twice in the second 2 periods. John Tavares scoring on the power play, Matthews tying it up before Matthew Knies scored the game winner. And the Leafs thankfully avoided a disaster where Matthew Knies got called for hooking in the last minute of the game before Philly gave the game away with a Jamie Drysdale tripping penalty, which was a huge LOL moment, giving the Leafs a huge win in Philly. That's an A tier. The next game was the 6-3 loss to the Carolina Hurricanes, where the Leafs had a 2-0 lead in that game, and the Hurricanes played hero by making the Leafs blow a 2-0 lead. Even after an Austin Matthews tying goal that tied things up at 3 on the power play, the damage was already done, with the Hurricanes overcoming a 2-0 deficit, and Jordan Staal getting a hat trick with an empty netter by Seth Jarvis. Absolutely shambolic. That was a huge blow to the chest. So that was a D tier. I'm not even kidding around here. So, of course I did do a rant on this Leafs 6-3 loss to the Hurricanes. But when I was doing that rant, including the Canucks rant, with Leafs lost 3-0 to the Canucks, which I will get to that shortly, I was sick. I wasn't yelling. I was like, we had this, had that. My voice was shitless. I don't know if I can say this, but I was feeling sick. There's nothing I could do. So it was I tried to yell as best I can, but I couldn't. Even if I wanted to. It just didn't have the full stamina to do it. Now, even if I didn't get sick on the Christmas break, post-Christmas break, I believe, where we were in January, who knows, I would have been yelling. But it is what it is. But it was just one of those days, one of those times where I was going to think of doing a Leafs rant, but I didn't. I was coughing, my voice was low, so there's nothing I could do to yell or scream. So I had to go by and just, talk softly, try and yell as much as I can, but, I just couldn't. Especially the 6-3 loss to Carolina and the 3-0 loss to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, let's get to that game. Let's continue on. Let's go to the Vancouver game right here, right now. So the next one was a 3-0 loss to the Vancouver Canucks, where the Leafs got shut out by the Canucks. And Kevin Lankinen gets a hat trick. The Leafs couldn't solve Kevin Lankinen. Even when the Leafs had 3 power play goals and they had their chances, they just couldn't score a goal. It's probably the most undeserving shutout in NHL history. And the third game the Leafs got shut out. Third game where the Leafs got shut out in 26 games, being the 3-0 loss to Ottawa. And the biggest insult is starting Dennis Hill to be in net instead of Joseph Woll. And oh boy, he let in Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, and Kiefer Sherwood to score, letting in 3 goals. I get that. I get it. You didn't have Joseph Woll. Joseph Woll would have been in net. But I understand he was injury prone, but it's just not acceptable. That was complete and utter bollocks. Now, if the Leafs did start Joseph Woll over Dennis Hiddleby, this would have been an A tier at its best. But no, it wasn't meant to be that way. It was a D tier. Shambolic, disgusting game. Next game was the 4-1 loss to the Dallas Stars, where, once again, The Leafs literally had scored once. They scored first blood, and then of course Dallas scored to tie things up at 1 before letting in two goals in the third. And I think it was like, I don't know how to say this, but like the refs were favoring the Stars to get the win, having 2 power play goals, going 2 for 3 on the power play by Matt Duchene and Marvick Bourque. Marvick Bourque, and Tavares getting penalized by the refs twice. And God, that hurts. Everything else was just pure disgrace. So that was the D tier. Oh boy. Next off was the 4-3 overtime win over the New Jersey Devils. And guess who returns to Toronto? Sheldon Keefe. Keefe returns to Toronto as the Devils head coach. And the Leafs ended not just their 3-game losing streak by winning in overtime, not just sweeping Keefe and the Devils out of Toronto, but we also got a chance to spoil Sheldon Keefe's. I think we spoiled Keefe's return, which is pure cinema at its best, because there was a lot of things that went right and what went wrong. You got Austin Matthews and William Nylander having 2 goals, having a 2-goal night, followed by a 3-point performance under William Nylander, and the overtime goal itself, which is phenomenal. But what wasn't really great was Oliver Ekman-Larsson getting penalized twice, one for tripping and the other for hooking after the Leafs scored, which allowed Nico Hischier to score twice on the power play. You're lucky OEL didn't get penalized again, or else, again, if the Leafs lost that game because of OEL getting penalized 3 times in a row, then this would have been a D tier. But at least Leafs got the win. So that gives the right to put it in the A tier. Next off was the 7-3 win over the Montreal Canadiens. And let me tell you something. That game was the best game I've seen, because in that game, the Leafs were down 3-0 to the Habs in the first period, led by Kirby Dach, Patrick Laine, and Josh Anderson, before the Leafs dialed in, coming back and destroying the living crap out of the Habs with seven unanswered goals coming from the Leafs. You got Bobby McMahon scoring, Nick Robertson scoring the power play goal, William Nylander, Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the power play, shorthanded goal by Austin Matthews, Steven Lorentz, and David Kampf with the shorthanded empty netter, and Joseph Woll preventing a Habs comeback, which was highly unlikely, where Joseph Woll made that save. And that game, I'm going to tell you this once, and I'll say it again. That game was a 1 in a million. So that gives it an S tier. Really phenomenal game. The next game was the Tampa Bay game, where the Leafs won 5-3 over the Lightning. And the Leafs once again cruised against Tampa with a satisfying win, having a disciplined 40 minutes of hockey, with having Austin Matthews, Matthew Knies, and William Nylander scoring for Toronto, and Tampa's Nick Paul making it a 1-goal game in the second period. And then in the third period, where things got a bit hairy, where Toronto got screwed on penalties twice, and Tampa once. And the Lightning nearly came back from a 4-2 deficit with Nick Paul and Darren Radish, before Mitch Marner scored the empty netter to put the Flames out. It's the penalties that killed the Leafs, and you're supposed to play a disciplined game, but, at least the Leafs won that game, so that gives it an A tier. Next game was the 5-1 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and this was on, I believe it was Next Gen night, where Dennis Hildeby starts at net once again, and the Leafs get manhandled by the Blue Jackets 5-1, and Adam Fantilli gets a hat trick, which really killed the move for the Leafs in the end. Once again, that really made me furious, and to see Hildeby get lit up by a Christmas tree by the Jackets is just completely. It's just not the way to achieve it. Allowing 4 goals, man, give me a break. But the only funny thing I could say, the only good thing about this game was that it wasn't just a hat trick. It was the fight between Matthias Olivier and Ryan Reeves. and Austin Matthews and Elvis Merlinkins getting penalized for Merlinkins penalized for holding Matthews' stick, and Austin Matthews another penalty for an illegal stick used by the goaltender stick. So other than that, it's just bad, like actually bad. That's a D tier. Next off is the 2-1 loss to the Ottawa Senators, where guess who? Leafs lost to the Senators once again. Instead of Linus Ullmark, Sens have to they start in Anton Forsberg, and we couldn't get it done because it was another. It was a competitive game. Okay, you got McMahon scoring the goal. You got Tim Stützle scoring. Okay, everything was tied. Only to let in a stinker where, wait for it, Shane Pinto scored the goal, which wasn't a good goal since the puck was kicked in by Pinto's leg. And the refs still called it a good goal. And Nick Cousins, being Nick Cousins, injuring himself and injuring Jacob Quilvin with a violent hit. So that hit, followed by a Shane Pinto goal. Terrible. That's terrible. That's just a bull. That's a D tier. And next off was the 3-1 loss to the Minnesota Wild, where yes, it was another sloppy game for the Leafs. Leafs were down 2-0 to the Wild in the first period, with Philip Gustafsson playing out of his mind in the first 2 periods, before William Nylander made it a 1-goal game in the third period, only to give it away in the dying minutes of the third period, where Marcus Foligno scored the empty netter, preventing a Leafs comeback. It's just one of those stinkers again. But you know what's also a stinker? Marc-Andre Fleury not playing in his farewell tour in Toronto, which really killed the mood for the Leafs. Really killed the mood. I want to see Marc-Andre Fleury get a standing O by the Toronto crowd, but no. He had to get a standing ovation in Montreal where the Wild blanked the Habs 4-0. Absolutely disgusting. So that's a D tier. And that is part 2 of ranking every NHL game from best to worst. I'll see you guys next time on part 3, where we continue on with the games from February and March. So until then, I'll see you guys next time.